America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new...
This is a clip of press conference from June 18, 1971 by President Richard Nixon, during which he declared drug abuse a public enemy number one. President Nixon had formally declared a war on drugs 2 years before this. With the introduction of new initiatives, including a set of drug policies that were intended to discourage the production, distribution, and consumption of psychoactive drugs, and devoting more federal resources to the prevention of new addicts and rehabilitation of those who are addicted. Today, the Drug Policy Alliance, which advocates for an end to the war on drugs, estimate that the United States spends around $51 billion on these initiatives. The president who founded War on Drugs ended up smuggling weed. Along with President Nixon, there is another person involved in this story, named Louis Armstrong. Best known for his gravelly voice, Armstrong was one of the first African American entertainers in the United States to become successful among the white audiences during the era of segregation. But apart from being an enduring jazz icon, he is clear representation of the American success, the story of ordinary American since he faced and overcome many hardships on the way to success. He was born into a troubled household and he had to work his way through a reform school in which he had been sent after firing a gun in the air on New Year's Eve. It was there where he fell in love with music and learned to play the cornet. However, what is less known about him is that he had a special fondness for marijuana and helped in the popularization of it in 1920s among musicians and celebrities. It appears that he was first turned into marijuana in mid-1920s and continued enjoying it throughout the rest of his life and career, including before performances and recording sessions. Armstrong is undoubtedly the man who has truly revolutionized the world of jazz and secured himself a place in music history as one of the best jazz players to have ever lived. In November 1930, Louis Armstrong became the first celebrity to be arrested for smoking marijuana when he and his drummer were caught smoking a joint just outside the Cotton Club. Little did they know that they would be spending the rest of the lovely night in a prison cell. The next morning, police informed them that they were sentenced to 6 months jail. Luckily for Armstrong and his friend, the sentences were eventually suspended. Louis Armstrong and his fondness for cannabis occurred in late 1950s, when Louis was at the peak of his career and was internationally known and beloved in every corner of the world. At that time, the United States sent African American jazz musicians on tour around the world to act as goodwill ambassadors and promote the triumph of American democracy in the era of Cold War. The legendary Louis Armstrong was among those African American jazz musicians sent to Europe and Asia with the task to promote American culture and democracy. The ambassadorial status had its advantages, and Armstrong soon realized that he was not obliged to report what he carried in his bag to the custom officers at the airport throughout the United States. However, on one occasion, when Armstrong landed at New York, he was instructed to join a long line of travelers and go towards the custom lines where he was about to be inspected. There was only a small problem. Armstrong was carrying 3 pounds of marijuana in his suitcase. He began sweating profusely in fear that he might be caught by the officers at the airport. The situation was getting more and more intense, and it seemed like there was no way out. Just then, the doors swung open and Vice President Richard Nixon, in step with his security detail, swept in the room, followed by a gaggle of reporters and photographers. Nixon, seeing an opportunity for a wire photo with Armstrong, went up to the jazz man and said, "What are you doing here?" Armstrong replied, "Well, Pops, I just came back from my Goodwill Ambassador tour from Asia and they told me I had to stand in this line for customs." Without hesitation, Nixon grabbed both of Armstrong's suitcases and said, "Ambassadors don't have to go through customs and the Vice President of United States will gladly carry your bag for you." And this is how the Vice President muled 3 pounds of pot through United States customs without ever knowing it. And that's how Richard Nixon smuggled drugs. As it appears, Nixon, the father of war on drugs, was once Jazzman's drug mule. But Richard Nixon was told what happened by Charles McWhorter, who served as a traveling aide to Nixon who heard the tale from one of the jazz musicians traveling with Armstrong. A startled Nixon exclaimed, "Louis smokes marijuana." Upon the jazz legend's death in 1971, President Nixon recognized Armstrong's incomparable contribution to America and his creative individuality. So hope you guys find this video interesting. Make sure to let me know your opinions on this topic. And if you like the video and such content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching and be safe.